vissuto Phil.
No, 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 no. No, 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 no. No fucking way, you made me look a right cunt.
This is Arsecast Extra.
Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, hello to you.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm okay. Actually, I want to start this morning, before we delve into what is undoubtedly going to be an introspective, perhaps somewhat doom-laden podcast. I think we should take a moment to offer our congratulations to the Arsenal women who became Women's Super League champions yesterday with a 4-0 win over Brighton. Hurrah! Champions! Arsenal champions! Round of applause from me anyway. I think they deserve hearty congratulations for a brilliant season, and we should acknowledge that as we prepare to cause ourselves a great deal of angst when we talk about, you know, the other Arsenal team.
Yeah, it's kind of really annoying, isn't it, how they seem to quite regularly schedule Arsenal women's games to be up against the men's games. That is a pain. But yeah, I saw the highlights from the game and there was a couple of brilliant goals. Many congratulations to them as champions. They are absolutely doing the club proud.
Sure are. If you want to read a bit more about that, head over to Arseblog News. There is a section specifically dedicated to the women's team. Tim Stillman has been doing a lot of fantastic post-match coverage of the Brighton game and stuff throughout the season. You can read their reactions and everything else there. So, well done to the Arsenal women. To the Arsenal men...
what would you say to them if you could? If you were able to address the Arsenal men this morning in the wake of that Leicester game, what would you say?
Lads, I'd say, what the fuck is what? Why are you? I don't know what I'd say, because there's part of me, you know, there's you look at the team and you kind of go, oh, come on, boys, you're better than that. But then I think, you know, a healthy part of what I'm feeling this morning is based around the manager too. So I don't feel like I could just push all the blame on the players, you know? I know there are games where you think you could just like take them aside and give them a sound thrashing and hope that might make them better. But I'm not sure that's the case this morning, and certainly after this week, you know? Is there anything specific you would say to them beyond like, what the fuck? Or
just think about what you've done, really. Think about what you've done to us all. I mean, it's been an absolutely nightmarish week. Yeah. Even our own sort of moderate expectations have been mightily surpassed in their awfulness. I don't think anyone would have looked at these three games, Palace, Wolves and Leicester, and said, well, that will be 3 defeats. You know, you might have thought 2, but 3. But even go on.
Even the fact that you might have thought 2 is bad enough, isn't it? Is that not bad? That you might have looked at games against Crystal Palace, Wolves and Leicester and thought, well, you know, we might win one of them. I mean, that's bad.
I mean, I think Wolves are pretty good. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think Wolves are going to finish 7th. For a long time, that was sort of Everton, wasn't it? And you would always say, well, going to Goodison Park's tricky. You don't know what you're going to get. And I think, you know, that's a game that in isolation you'd say, yeah, anyone could lose there. But yes, it's not good. It's not good.
It's not good. It's been a really disastrous week for the team, for the club, for Unai Emery in particular, who I think has throughout this season done a pretty good job for the most part, and I've absolutely done my best to give him credit where credit is due. You know, I understand the situation he's come into at this club. I understand the difficulties with the squad, with the way the club is run. I'm sure we'll come to that at some point as well. Throughout this podcast, you know, I've actually made notes. I don't normally make notes, and I've made some notes here that we want to go through. Shit. That's big. Shit is this right. Is big. This is getting intense here. You know, but I think for all the credit that he deserves for getting us into a position where we had top 4 in our hands, where we could have gone, you know, just 8 days ago, we could have gone above Tottenham. with a win against Crystal Palace. We were in a good position in the Premier League, and after this week, he deserves credit for that on the one hand. Absolutely, I'm not taking that away from him, but you can't give him credit on one hand for where he got us and not criticize or analyze where it's gone wrong in the last week. And I think it's gone really, really wrong in the last week, and it begs a lot of questions, not just about the players. We can discuss the individual quality of the players and all that kind of stuff, but the manager made decisions this week. In some ways, remember when we went to Rennes and we went down to 10 men, and every decision that Emery made on the night was the wrong decision, and it resulted in whatever that game, what was a 3-1 defeat? 3-1 defeat. So the way that he managed that game was wrong. All the decisions he got were wrong. And we can say that in hindsight because we watched the game and we could analyse it afterwards. Here we are sitting after 3 games, 3 defeats, 2 of them away from home. And I think we can do the same thing. We can say pretty much that in each of the 3 games, Emery got it wrong. Would you disagree with that?
Well, no, because if you lose, you got it wrong. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you lose, everyone can look at it and say, well, your decisions were incorrect. But if you get the result, then everyone will say, you're a genius, you got it right.
Sure, I get that, but
like I think he got it wrong 100% against Crystal Palace. You'd never find any argument from me on that front.
Okay, let's touch on that very quickly. People will say he didn't have any other choice than to play the midfield pair of Guendouzi and El Neni, which I accept. There were injury problems and all that. To me, it wasn't the selection of those 2 in midfield in isolation that was the problem. It was playing a back 5 or back 3 and wing backs. That was the problem. It was that he didn't offset the weakness in midfield by selecting the right formation. So for me, it was a formation issue more than just picking El Neni and Guendouzi in midfield.
Yeah.
He took it maybe a little bit for granted that we were going to win that game because of our home record.
I agree, and I think he probably could have played one of Torreira or Xhaka, and I think after what happened at Everton and how poor Guendouzi and El Neni were as a pairing, I think I would have done that. But if you have to play them, if you absolutely have to, then start with Iwobi or something in the attack, or add that 4th attacking player. Yeah. I would mitigate that. Despite that, there were other reasons that we lost that game as well. But I would not challenge the idea that he got that wrong.
Okay. So if you get that right from the start and you take control of the game, maybe you don't make the mistakes that we made. Mustafi obviously had a nightmare that day, and he made mistakes which contributed in very large part to losing that game against Palace. But if you take control of that game in the first half, maybe you're not in a position where mistakes kill you or the game plays out in a different way. That's what I'm saying. So then we go to Wolves, and he has to take a risk because he's lost at home against Palace in a game in which he should be perhaps a little bit more conservative, or we could understand a conservative approach more easily and more readily, and which would have been perhaps better suited to that game because, as you point out, Wolves are good and are 7th and are playing very well. He has to take a risk, and the risk backfires. Right?
Yeah, that's fair. Although I would say that, we sat on this podcast and picked our Wolves team, and it was the team he put out. Like, at that moment that lineup was announced, everyone was like, "Oh, great, 4 at the back. Okay, we're going for it."
Okay, yep, fair enough. I'll fully accept that. But was our team for Wolves not based on the fact that we just lost against Crystal Palace? So if we'd had a win against Crystal Palace at home, would we perhaps have been more inclined to say, actually, the best approach away from home is, to play 3 at the back and maybe be a bit more in control? I'm again, hindsight's a wonderful thing and all that. So
yeah, of course. If we beat Palace, obviously a point against Wolves becomes a good point, especially with the fact that Chelsea dropped points against Burnley on Monday. I mean, arguably, Chelsea dropping those points made a decent enough result against Wolves anyway.
Yeah.
So I agree that in some ways the approaches to the Palace and Wolves game, again, ideally post-rationalising, should have been flipped. we were sort of too negative in the home game and maybe a bit too ambitious in the away game. Although actually, if we attacked well, I don't think it would have been such a problem, but we just were such a blunt force against Wolves.
We were, and that's a worry, and that's maybe something we'll come to again in a little while. So then, what did you make of the team that he picked yesterday?
Well, I think it was surprising. I mean, Emery's instinct is to twist rather than stick if something doesn't work, and to his credit, that has largely worked this season. I know we've had sort of patches where we haven't been convinced by performance, but I would say in results terms, this is probably our first really actually bad spell of the season. We hadn't lost more than 2 consecutive games since his first 2 games. Generally, when there'd been a really bad result, he had managed to provoke a response to that, and that sort of contributed to the sort of stop and start, 1 step forward, 2 step back feeling that we've sort of had this season. But this week it has felt like he's been just reaching for something, trying to pull something out of his arse, and it hasn't worked. The only thing I would say about what he picked is that it is essentially the team he picked in probably our best away performance of the season, which was at Fulham, which was a back 4, a midfield 4 with Iwobi and Mkhitaryan wide and 2 up top. So it's not like there wasn't some precedent for that working.
No, I mean, I looked at the lineup and I thought, okay, I knew he was going to rest Koscielny. He had to rest Koscielny. We all understood that.
Yeah.
Mustafi came back in. I don't think Mustafi in particular was any problem really yesterday. So I'm not suggesting that was an issue. No. What really annoyed me, but made me a bit sad actually, was our approach to the game. And I've seen people say, well, we've been really bad away from... Look at what happened against Wolves, where we had control of the game and we had more possession and then we lost 3-0. As if somehow having possession is a bad thing, or trying to control the game is a bad thing. I thought the way we set up, or the way we approached the game yesterday, was really timid. It was not what I expect from Arsenal. It's not what I expect from an Arsenal team with those players in it. I think that team that he picked is more than capable of playing good attacking football, or certainly has done in the past. There were a few differences from the lineup that we went to Wembley with and played very well against Tottenham with. So it's not a question that these players can't play attacking football or can't control a game or can't, get on top of the opposition. We went there and we were afraid. We were afraid from the first minute. And that, I think, played a big part in how yesterday went. I feel like, in some ways, it was a contributory factor to the fact we went down to 10 men, because we were playing on the back foot the whole time. Leicester had amazing chances before we even went down to 10 men, and Emery is saying we started very well. I mean, I think I did it in the live blog. By the 15th minute, we'd only made something like 10 passes. And this is Arsenal going to Leicester. This is not fucking Burton Albion going to Barcelona. And that's the way we set up. And for me, that was a really hard thing to watch and a hard thing to take, to be honest, because it felt like we were afraid.
It is upsetting. Don't worry.
Sorry,
we're all sad.
Sorry, I'm a little bit croaky there, but it just felt like a really small time approach to a game. And people might say it's pragmatic. I would say it's wrong. I just don't know how you can. How do you go to a club, or how do you go into a game knowing that you conceded 3 goals in your last 2 games? Defensively, you're not great anyway, and your game plan is based around letting the opposition have the ball. How does that make any sense?
Well, I don't feel as strongly about that as you, just because I'm not that bothered if we're a possession team or not. Like, it doesn't really matter to me if we control the ball. I've watched a lot of Arsenal controlling the ball, and to be honest, it's often quite boring. It's often really boring. And, I think that if you look at... It's interesting you cite the Spurs performance. That's not a game where we controlled the ball. Like, we were on the back foot. That was a rearguard action for long periods. We're playing out on the break. And actually, all of Emery's great performances this season have been like that. Or, they've been like the home games against United and Chelsea, where in the second half we sit off, and when we win and we like it, we satisfy ourselves and say, yeah, they just were comfortable there, they saw that out. But the reality is, it's a pretty not negative, but it's a pretty sort of defence-first approach.
But this is Leicester.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that all the hallmarks of Emery's good performances are kind of consistent. Like, it's not surprising to me. He's never, ever been a guy who goes out to control the ball and control the game. I think he said protagonists once in a press conference, and I think people have misinterpreted that. I don't think it's like this is new. I think he's always been this coach. And it's completely fair to not like it and be like, I don't think that's how Arsenal play. But Arsenal have played that way for the last 5 years, and it hasn't been very successful. So,
yeah.
I mean, I hear you, but I also am like, do we have the... I'm not sure I agree with you that we have the quality to sort of go to Leicester and completely dominate them.
I didn't say we should completely dominate them. What I mean is we should go and try and play football, not go and... Oh man, it was just so insipid and so weak and so craven. There was no... I don't want to go down the road of talking about character and intensity and all that kind of stuff, but you can see when players are up for a game, and we weren't up for that game yesterday.
I agree with you, but then whatever system you play, whatever your intention is, how do you explain Granit Xhaka and Lucas Torreira being absolutely bossed for the entire game by Chowdhury and Ndidi, like us losing almost every 50-50 in the match? Whatever system you play, that can't be changed. That's the players for me.
But are you saying that those players can't compete against Ndidi and Chowdhury? Is that what you're saying? That Lucas Torreira, the guy who many were holding up as the answer to our midfield problems earlier in the season, he was bringing us qualities that we didn't have. He was competitive. He was winning tackles. Are you saying that they are incapable of doing that job against a mid-table Premier League team? Or is it that perhaps the system or the way that we were instructed to play yesterday meant that they couldn't perform that way?
I think it's sort of probably a bit of both. But I would say that there is an issue with this squad that I think we massively overestimate their ability. And when I look at this squad, I'm like, there are a lot of relics of when we were a top club, but
yeah,
they're sort of not anymore.
I tell you what, yeah, go on.
Well, no, I was just going to say that, like, when you see, we talk about that idea of like the Goldilocks player, and say someone like a Xhaka, and we're like, well, of course he's brilliant. Do you remember that game where he was brilliant? Yeah. And then it's like, why isn't he like that game where he was brilliant all the time? And it's because he's not that player. What we do is we see a player at the top end of their performance, and we think that's their level, but it isn't their level. They don't produce it every single week. And I find that a real issue. And if we had a squad that I felt we could go to, even Leicester, who, by the way, I don't think are terrible. Like, it's not like this is Huddersfield, which was a really poor performance as well, don't get me wrong. But if I thought we could go to Leicester and play 4-2-3-1 and win that match, I mean, if Emery's not confident in that, I understand, because I'm not confident in that at all. Yeah. I think we would lose playing like that.
Well, we lost playing the way that he sent us out to play as well. I know there's the red card will come into it, and we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, look,
his first goal wins away from home.
Of course it is, but I mean that's another indictment of our character, if you ask me. That,
yeah.
The minute a goal goes in against us at home, we're done for. We're gone.
What I would say is that has changed. Like, at the start of the season, we had frequently bad starts, terrible first halves, went behind, and we were coming back and winning or drawing those games.
At home,
and it was
not away from home. If we concede the first goal away from home, that's it. We're done. We've only got 1 point away from home when the opposition have scored first all season. So that's
right. Yeah, I'm thinking of games like there was Cardiff was there or something. Yeah, I
think we scored first and they equalised. We scored again. They equalised and we got a winner. You know, but let me posit this to you. Do you feel like the approach yesterday, as much as you can see the sense in it, do you not feel like it transmits something to the players in terms of the belief that they have in themselves? Because,
because Unai Emery sits there in the press conference afterwards, and unless he's lying, he says the intention was to control the game. And I think he says control the ball. So, we can say the approach was wrong, but I don't know to what extent we know that they're carrying out his instruction. I mean, I'm sure the approach wasn't, guys, when you get out there, can you try and lose every challenge and not really string a pass together? That'd be great, thanks. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but let me just read what he did say.
Okay, well, you find it, because ultimately he's picked 4-4-2. He's picked 2 strikers.
Yeah.
That's not a negative inherently system.
No, I agree with you, but how you approach a game can make that a negative system. Like if you've no intent to play, it can only be negative. If your intent is to just sit back and hit on the counter-attack, which is a fucking ludicrous idea when you're a team that can't really defend, it just makes my head scramble trying to get my head around that.
But he said how we got a point at Spurs. That is what we did at Spurs. That's the thing. And everyone raved about that. Yeah. And I know it's Spurs, but
I think it's...
This is who Emery is. This is who he is.
I don't like it. He said, our game plan was to be strong today in our defensive moments and in our attacking moments to take our chances, attacking their back four. We started very well. We started controlling the match. Good positioning. Defensively, not a lot of problems. They were with the possession, but the idea at home above all is to control with possession, but we were good on the pitch. And then he said the second yellow card gave us a lot of problems to control or continue our game plan. As if somehow the second yellow card was what was preventing us from being in this game. Right?
Yeah, we were really poor before the red card.
Exactly. They had 8 attempts on goal, maybe 9 attempts on goal. There was a brilliant chance for Vardy. I mean, I know Iwobi had a chance on his left foot, which he missed as well, but it ignores how can you say we started very well? How can you look at the way that Arsenal played yesterday and think that that is an acceptable way to approach a Premier League game? I hear everything you're saying. I just do not agree that Arsenal, regardless of what you think about the individual quality of the players, should be that craven away from home, because it's about, you can say it's about trying to control a game defensively. You can't control a game defensively, and we didn't control a game defensively with those players. That's a foolish way to set up, if you ask me. The only realistic way I could see us winning that game, James, was to try and control possession for at least some period of the game. And to rely on defenders who have performed or underperformed throughout this season, who just conceded 3 goals in their last 2 games, to base your game plan around defence, I just can't. I just can't. I don't get it. I think I think Emery was afraid. I think his natural... what's the word? His sort of default position when he's a little bit under pressure is to try and make us more solid defensively. And this was our 36th game of the season. And if he hasn't seen by now that that's not a strength around which to base your approach to a game, I worry in a big way.
Well, I think that you're right. I think that is his inclination. I think that especially away from home, he's kind of a defence-first guy. And I think that if you look at his away record at Sevilla, and obviously there's the infamous season of not winning a game away from home, I think that probably tells you that that's sort of a consequence of that stance, and B, probably has influenced that stance. You know, there is probably a bit of trepidation and fear for him when he goes away from home. I concur. I'm not so of the mind that like Arsenal must be this possession-based team and that must be how we play. That's not really an ideal I share necessarily, because, you know, there were times last season where I was like, bring me Diego Simeone, bring me Rafa Benitez, bring me someone who can organise this fucking team. Like, I don't think that's inherently awful, but I don't necessarily think that Emery's the best exponent of it.
No, I agree with you in that. I mean, I love defending, and I love a team that can defend. And if you ask me, you know, is there as much enjoyment in seeing us, scrap out a 1-0 as winning 4-0? Perhaps not, but I can see the beauty of it. We've watched it down the years. You know, we are wedded to this perhaps ideal of attacking football that Arsene Wenger brought to the club. You know, Emery's not that guy, and I do see the logic in having a pragmatic approach or being tactically flexible. So here's my question. Here's one of the notes that I put down. It's something we touched on earlier in the season. It's sort of gone away. But after 36 games, what is Unai Emery's style of football? Do you understand it? And do you think the players understand it? If you know what it is.
Yeah, I think it is reactive. I think that he is someone who does change his style, his system, his lineup, dependent on the occasion, depending on the opponent, depending on the task. So I think it is sort of almost impossible to say Unai Emery's teams play like that. Do I think the players understand it? Not really, no. I don't think they do. They don't look like they do they?
No, they don't. I mean, when you say it's reactive before the game, but not necessarily during a game. Like, he's not a manager who can turn a game around really when things are going badly.
I don't agree with that, actually. I think he can.
Do you not?
Yeah. Like, okay. I think
give me an example of it. Give me an example of it.
The Spurs derby at home. 2 changes at half-time.
Fair enough.
Massively swings the momentum. I think in the first half of the season, we were banging on about these substitutions. Oh my God, his halftime changes. He might get it wrong at the start, but he's so good at changing it once it's kicked off. You know, that was definitely a discussion. Now, has that been less true of late? Definitely.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Generally are in a dip. I think he gets it right during games sometimes more than he does before. I think he spends a lot of time correcting his mistakes. I mean, I'm not saying in any of this that I think Unai Emery's doing an incredible job. I'm just saying that I think fundamentally, sort of jumping ahead here, I'm enjoying this season more than I have other seasons because I like having a manager. I like the variation.
Chaos.
It's not chaos. I think it's like I like there being a sort of logic and a kind of... I just find it interesting, I guess. But I was so bored by Arsenal.
Sure, I get it. But do you not find... I mean, I know what you're saying, but I think I find this really frustrating as well.
I think most people do.
Yeah, it's just really a continuation. It's the same but different, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's going on really is that... this is broadening out. We're sort of stepping away from the match slightly, but I think a lot of people said when Arsene Wenger left, right, it's going to be transition now. It's going to be sticky. It's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And I think they didn't mean that when they said they were ready for that. I think that was a lie that a lot of people told then. And, to my mind, we are in that transition and we probably have got a ferryman manager who's here for the next 2 or 3 years and has a very sort of specific job, which is get us back into the top 4, even though we're probably not really good enough for the top 4. And I don't really, however awful this week has been, see a reason to be like, well, that plan's completely gone to shit and completely out the window.
Okay, but do you not, I mean, I have to say, again, with the caveat that I can see all the challenges that Unai Emery has had to face throughout this season, with injuries, with the lack of backing from the board and from the club in January, when I think we as a team and as a club, we really needed it and there was none forthcoming. I think there's a fundamental issue at the very top of the club, which we can discuss probably in part 2. But, having put us in a position to achieve top 4 and to secure Champions League football, whether we're ready for it or not, or good enough, I don't see that as an excuse, right? Because the more we're out of the Champions League, the less ready we're going to be, and the worse we're going to get for it. So my faith or belief in what Unai Emery is doing has been very shaken by the last 4 or 5 Premier League games. We've won 1 of our last 5 games at a crucial point in the season when the pressure is on and when you can read a lot into how a manager performs, because we can talk about the players and this, that and the other. Nobody questions the players when we beat Napoli 2-0 and go away and we beat them away from home, or when we beat Manchester United, or when we beat Chelsea, or when we beat Tottenham. There's none of this, well, these aren't his players. They're the players that he's worked with to get those results. So these are his players when things go poorly. So for the only game, we've played Everton, Watford, Palace, Wolves and Leicester. And the only game we won was a 1-0 away at Watford with a freakish goal when they were down to 10 men for 80 minutes. I accept everything that you're saying.
We didn't deserve to.
No, maybe we didn't. It's just really worrying that at this point...
It's really bad.
It's really bad. It's a terrible run. But, surely, I'm not saying it's 100% on Emery, but the buck stops with the manager when it comes right down to it. And we are tired, and we've had a lot of games in April, and we've had injuries. But I think a good manager, I'm not saying Emery's not a good manager, but the point I'm making is a good manager will make decisions which offset those problems as much as possible. And I feel the way that Emery has operated in the last few weeks is that he's just made those issues worse. And I think that comes down to him for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think it has been a really bad run, particularly domestically. I mean, obviously the Napoli games are kind of sandwiched in there, but in the Premier League, it's been really poor. And to be clear, I'm not denying that. And no one is more gutted than me that we aren't going to make top 4 now. I mean, I think I said I'd rather have top 4 than win the Europa League. I really wanted the top 4. Because it would have been a real indicator of progress, in a way that I think winning a cup just isn't. I mean, it's great, it's brilliant, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't make you a brilliant team. We know that enough from the FA Cup. So, yeah, I wanted the top 4, and I think we've shown that we aren't at that level. And there is momentum involved. I mean, this is an incredibly bad run, and it's sort of got incrementally worse. And I think you're right, as Emery sort of tried to correct his own mistakes, it's kind of become a circular problem. Andre Villas-Boas would call it a negative spiral.
Yeah.
But and it is, and the fear is I don't necessarily know how you arrest that at this point, and obviously there's a real fear that it could bleed into our Europa League campaign.
Yeah, it is.
I completely agree, and I do lay a good deal of blame at the manager's door. I think that it's right to talk about the players too, because we seem to be so convinced of their ability despite relatively limited evidence.
Okay, all right, yeah, okay. This brings me on to my next thing. But let's first just discuss very quickly the red card for Ainsley Maitland-Niles, which, leaving aside everything else that we've been saying, undoubtedly had an impact on the game. Because it was 0-0, it was 0-0 until the hour mark, and, who knows? With 11 men, maybe we score a goal. Maybe Leicester have to push on a bit. Maybe we find a break and we score the second goal. You know, we can't ignore the fact that it had an impact on the game. I thought that first yellow card was absurd. If that's a yellow card, if that's a bookable offence, there wouldn't be a game finished with 11 men on either side in the Premier League or any league that you ever play football in. I don't know what the fuck he was thinking to give a yellow card there.
See, weirdly, I actually think the second yellow card is more egregious. Only because in the first case, I presume the yellow card is not actually for the shoulder, not actually for the challenge, but for the perceived cynicism. Do you know what I mean? And the guy's like in behind.
Fair enough. But, I still think it's just like...
Yeah, it's still harsh, don't get me wrong.
It's a sort of 50-50, maybe 60-40 in favour of the Leicester player, and the two players come together. It's a free kick. No question. Free kick, but it's not a yellow card, I don't think. It wasn't like he was hanging onto his jersey or anything like that.
For me, the second one, I'm like, well, he doesn't really even make contact there.
No, and actually, the decision is made by the scream of the player. That's why he made the decision. When Maddison was like, he killed me. I think that's what he gave the yellow card for, because he was playing on. He was playing on, and then he brought it back.
I felt for Maitland-Niles because he was kind of talking to Maddison after, wasn't he, and saying, thanks for nothing. What
did you make? I've seen a lot of people on Twitter saying that somehow that's symptomatic of our problems at the moment, that Maitland-Niles... not so much that he's hugging Maddison, but like that the two of them have a discussion rather than Maitland-Niles going crazy. I mean, I have to say, what's the benefit of a young guy going absolutely mental in that situation? He's got to respect the decision of the referee. It's not like he can just spark Maddison out on the pitch and get himself a 5-game or a 10-game ban, And
I think the little we know about Maitland-Niles, I don't think that's his natural reaction. Do you know what I mean? He seems like a very placid kind of guy.
Yeah.
No, I've got no issue with him being like a reasonable man whatsoever. I think that's okay.
Yeah. So look, it played a part. And we brought Iwobi off, brought Koscielny on, and ultimately the goals. Do we even need to discuss the goals? I think Xhaka was really poor for the first goal. Second goal,
the first goal.
First goal was
the header.
The header. Yeah, Tielemans ran off him. Tielemans, a player who came on loan from Monaco, who was available in January.
I know, and I think I spoke about it on Twitter at the time because I've always liked him as a player. He had a terrible time at Monaco, but really talented. And if Leicester managed to keep him, I think they'll struggle, to be honest.
No, I think so too. But it just shows you that there was potentially a player out there in January, at least one player, who might have made a difference to this squad. It's quite funny, isn't it? Every time we play anyone, certainly this week, there's people saying, well, you know what, this guy would walk into the Arsenal squad, that guy would walk into the Arsenal squad. Absolutely. The more games we play, the easier it is to get into this Arsenal squad. By the end of the season, maybe some of us could fucking get into it. Second goal, really poor defending. I think Koscielny and Sokratis were very poor. Long ball from Schmeichel over the top, Jamie Vardy. And the third one, Guendouzi, I'm not sure what Guendouzi is doing. As a young guy who's got a lot to prove still, I don't think he can be proud of his effort there. I think Sokratis is poor. He gets dragged towards the ball, loses Vardy. Jamie Vardy's
third goal looked to me like a dead game at that point. I mean, there's a lot of players who I was like, you're not really in this game at this
Second goal's a dead game. Or look at it. If you look at it, Sokratis kind of gives up and Koscielny kind of gives up. Because they just assume...
And Mustafi to an extent, the far post. But the second goal, I mean, I saw some people blaming Leno. Did you feel that he should have been quicker maybe? I mean, I think he just baffled that the centre-halves don't win it.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know how yesterday you could point any fingers of blame at Bernd Leno because he made, 5 or 6 outstanding saves. He was our best player by a mile, even though he conceded 3 goals. I know he was culpable during the week, but he had an off night against Wolves, but he has been one of our best players recently, and that tells you something as well, that our goalkeeper is being as worked as hard as he is. It says such a lot about what kind of a team we are at the moment. So I wouldn't point any fingers of blame at Leno for that. It was fucking game over anyway. It was so late, and we weren't going to score.
It was game over from the red card. I mean, I know we were terrible before, but there was always, in my mind, I was watching it thinking, well, we've been really bad in this first half, but if we get in at 0-0 at half-time, you know, maybe we can use that as a little bit of a platform. But when we lost Maitland-Niles, I was like, well, this is done, you know, and it's something I've heard Tim Stillman talk about, but essentially when Arsenal suffer a setback, particularly away from home, they just don't seem to have any kind of response. And, you know, from the first goal, I mean, it was, you know, absolutely clear what happened.
Dreadful. A really bad day, a really bad week. And amazingly, we're still not completely out of the top four.
Don't know.
No. Listen, I said it after the Wolves game, I think, or before or after the Palace game. I said it's gone, but you know, mathematically, it is still possible if we beat Brighton and if we beat Burnley. Manchester City found it very tough against Burnley yesterday, which tells you that we're going to have a real fight on our hands if we manage to beat Brighton.
We'd need Chelsea to.
We need Chelsea to lose a game. Or
they're going to Leicester, so
or draw a game, and we need to pick up some goals in terms of goal difference.
Well, we've done our goal difference some real damage this week.
Again, you know, another really bad reflection, I think, on the manager. So I want to talk a bit about the squad, and I want to talk a bit about the players that we have and what we need to do. And I thought about this yesterday, what we need to do this summer in the transfer market, and then I went, Jesus, we've got such a big job. But just off the top of your head, right? I'm going to go through the squad, and I want you to tell me whether or not you would keep a player, or you wouldn't care if we let him go, right?
I mean, okay, you wouldn't care. I was going to say, can there be a don't care option? Because there's going to be a lot of them.
There's going to be a don't care. You know, it's keep or don't care. So Petr Cech, as we know, is going. Leno, keep for me.
Yeah, keep.
Bellerin.
Keep.
Socrates.
Keep.
Koscielny.
I would have to say keep.
Yeah, me too. Lichtsteiner. Gone.
Go, yeah.
Holding.
Keep.
Monreal.
I would err on the side of keep, but I think that puts me in a minority.
Yeah, I would too, but then we can discuss what we need to do with the squad in a minute. Mustafi. Go.
Oh, go, yeah.
Jenkinson.
Go.
Mavropanos.
For me, go on loan.
Okay. Kolasinac.
I would keep Kolasinac, probably. Yeah. Would you?
If we could get a left back, I'd replace him. I think he's really very average, to be honest. I think he's average.
I mean, the reason to not keep him is because he's on quite big money, to be honest. You know,
yeah, no, I don't even want to talk about wages when we discuss this. It's not a consideration. It's just as a player.
This is a footballing
consideration.
Okay.
El Neni.
He could go, yeah.
Mkhitaryan.
He could go.
Yeah. Ramsey is going.
Keep.
Ozil.
Come at me, guys. He could go.
Yeah, I feel like we could move on.
Just very quickly on Ozil, I basically feel like it's not actually. I've written a piece on this for The Athletic this week, but it's not a question of if Ozil's good enough for Arsenal. It's sort of a question if Arsenal are good enough to support Ozil at this point, tactically. And I don't think we are. I think Ozil could go to Man City or Barcelona and probably be pretty brilliant. I don't think that's going to happen at Arsenal.
Well, I tell you what, it's definitely not going to happen at Arsenal while Unai Emery is the manager.
Yeah, although I would definitely agree with that, but I would also say that in the latter years of Arsene Wenger, I think that Ozil brought with him certain tactical issues. Yeah. I think given where we are and where we need to get, I think we sort of need more of an efficiency, and so it isn't personal, but I would say
Torreira.
I would keep Torreira,
of course. Maitland-Niles.
Yeah, I'd keep most of the academy boys probably.
Denis Suarez, he's gonna go anyway. Guendouzi.
I would keep Guendouzi.
I would keep Guendouzi only because we've only had a year of him, but I'm not as hot on him as many people are. Xhaka.
I don't... that's a hard one. I'm going to say I don't care, I guess.
I don't care either. And I would err on the side of go. I think the reason we talk about Xhaka, or the reason Xhaka becomes important to us, is because of the paucity of quality and options that we have in our midfield. I think he's an okay player, but 3 years on now, you know, if he goes, he can go. He can go. You know, yeah. I don't think he's a bad guy or anything like that, but I think he's...
It just feels like we endlessly talk about him as well. Do you know what I mean? I feel that's not a good sign.
No. No, if you're constantly debating about whether a player is good enough or not, chances are that, you know, there are issues with him. Lacazette.
Keep.
Aubameyang.
I think keep.
You would keep our top scorer. Nice one.
I know. It's left field, isn't it?
I
do have a worry. Sorry, just on that. The reason, only hesitation for me is that I have this sort of growing suspicion that the players in this squad that we would class as sort of great players are all old ones. So, like, I think in their careers, Cech, Koscielny, Ozil, Aubameyang have been great players. I am not sure they are great players now. So that's just a little concern I have, but I think we need Aubameyang.
Okay. Iwobi.
I would keep. I would keep, but I wouldn't be devastated if he was sold.
All right.
So I guess he moves into don't care from there.
Danny Welbeck is going. Well, yeah, I'd keep him. But, you know, as a squad player and not somebody who should be starting every week.
Danny Welbeck keep for me, by the way.
Yeah, well, he's going. And then we're on to some loan players. Ospina.
Yeah, he could go.
Yeah. Chambers.
I think I would keep Callum Chambers at this point, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't care. So I don't care is what I'm saying. You know, he could go.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a significant portion of the squad that we would either let go or wouldn't care less if they went, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let me lay this on you now. This is what I think we need to do in the transfer market this summer, and some of these things are linked. All right, so we can talk about them, but I'll just lay it out for you. We need a replacement for Petr Cech. We need a replacement for Aaron Ramsey. We need a replacement for Danny Welbeck. We need a right back. We need a left back. We need at least one central defender. We need a central midfielder. Again, you could tie this in with the replacement for Ramsey, if you like. We need a wide forward / winger, and you could tie that into the replacement for Welbeck. And I feel like we need another striker. Now, whether that's Eddie Nketiah to play third choice to Lacazette and Aubameyang, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how he develops as a player unless he goes and plays some regular football, but I don't know that we can lean on those two players as hard as we have this season. Now, that again could be tied into getting a wide forward or a winger in the transfer market.
Two players in one.
It could be, yeah, or one player in two. I don't know what I just said there. It doesn't make any sense to me. But that's where I think we are.
So
now, let me also. Sorry, I'm getting emotional again. But we also need to be a bit more ruthless with some of the players that are in this squad that aren't contributing and won't contribute. You know, so you're looking at bringing in some squad players as well. So whether that's via the academy, you know, if you let El Neni go, can you suggest, for example, perhaps that Joe Willock could take his place in the squad? I think maybe you could, right? If Joe Willock is deemed ready to play 4 or 5 Premier League games the next season and feature in the cups and the Europa League, maybe if we're back in that, then why not? That's a solution to some of those issues within the squad.
Yeah.
Right? Would you disagree with any of that? Or would you say there's more to do? Is there anything that I've left out that you would like to see us do?
I think my only disagreement would be, do they all have to be signings? Like, is there a degree to which we would be able to promote the right back, for example? Like, could that be Maitland-Niles, for example? Or could the goalkeeper be
Martinez?
An Emi Martinez.
Yeah.
Who has apparently been very, very good for Reading.
At Reading. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying that all those things should be signings. I should have made that clear. So a replacement for Cech doesn't mean that we've got to go out and buy a goalkeeper if they think that, Emi Martinez is the guy to come in and play second fiddle to Bernd Leno. I'm not sure I'd have a big problem with that anymore. I know previously I've sort of expressed some doubts, but he has done well at Reading, and realistically, when I think about the budget that we have, maybe that's the right solution for this season,
Well, yeah, there's a couple of things. One is that we can't afford to make that many signings without selling more players than... so maybe we would, given how many players there are that you and I don't really care if they're here or not, there is an argument to say, well, sell a bunch of them and then you can actually get those. Yeah,
you can't. Yeah, but it's, we don't have well, let me come back to that then. Go on, just continue.
Well, I recognise it's not as straightforward as that. No, I don't in principle disagree with your list.
Okay.
I think it's essentially, it's what we would ideally get.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, massive amount of work. More than I believe will realistically happen, to be honest.
I agree. Which means we're going to have to stick with some of the underperforming players from this season.
Yeah.
Which is, I think if you step back from it objectively and say, is it realistic to do that amount of business in one summer or one transfer window? Maybe it's not, but maybe a club with actual ambition might have done one or two deals in January, which would mean that you're making incremental progress. You're not having to do everything in a summer, for example.
Absolutely. The nature of transition is that you have probably more changes to implement than you have time to do. And that could be a 2 or even 3 year process. But the fact that we essentially wasted a window looks increasingly like a massive mistake, especially if they don't follow it up with a lot of activity this summer.
Okay, right. Here's the other burning major issue for me, is that our head of recruitment left in February, and we knew he was leaving for a little while, and we haven't appointed anybody to that role. We tried to appoint Monchi and he turned us down, and then the club said, no, it's fine, don't worry about it. We're in no great hurry to make that position, get somebody in, even though we offered the job to a fucking guy and fully expected him to take it. It's all cool, don't worry. We don't have a head of recruitment. We have Raul Sanyehi, who is a deal closer, an administrator, a schmoozer, a kind of football executive, a boardroom kind of a guy, not a talent spotting kind of guy, right?
100%, yeah.
Okay, and that's great to have that kind of man at the club, because we all wanted a new David Dean type figure, and if he could be that guy, that was the ideal, wasn't it? Because Sven was going to go and identify the players and, do the scouting and do the groundwork to bring these players to the club, and Sanyehi was going to get the deals done. That's what he was going to do. And it seemed to work in a reasonable way last summer, didn't it? Because we got our deals done. We got the business done before mid-July, and that looked like the right way for our recruitment business to be done. Gazidis leaves. We have a power vacuum. Sanyehi takes the power. Mislintat's gone. We don't know who the fuck is really making the decisions behind the scenes about who we're going to buy and which sort of talent we're spotting. And that's a big, big worry for me. That's a really big worry for me. that I feel... Yeah, go on.
Well, I think, judging by who we got in January, I would guess that the decision's being made between sort of Emery and Sanyehi. I mean, that's the way it would look to me.
Right, so based on who we got in January, how much faith does that instill for you?
Not a huge amount.
No.
Not a huge amount.
No.
I've always favoured a technical director model. I think that it gives the club more stability. It makes them less reliant on a manager. It effectively makes the manager more disposable, which I think is sort of the right way for us to go at this point. So, yeah, I would love to have someone in that position. It's really alarming. I mean, how long is it now since Monchi went back to Sevilla? It must be a month at least.
Yeah.
And there's been no talk of an appointment. So that's gone very, 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 very quiet. And I would imagine most clubs are sort of really beginning their summer transfer work in earnest right now.
Yeah. It is a worry. Mislintat left in February, and there were rumours for, a good few weeks before that. And you would imagine that behind the scenes, the club knew that he was going.
From the Christmas time, at least, I would think.
Yeah.
They must have known. So for that whole of that January window, he was effectively working out his notice.
Yeah. And I know the logic behind, not wanting to do business in January. But... I think we needed it, though. I mean... Yeah, of course we needed it.
There was a justifiable way of excusing it, but we lost 3 players to season-ending injuries. I mean, we replaced them with a guy who was back up in a position where, by the time we got him, we didn't really need the backup. No, and who's been injured and, has been absolutely useless for us. A complete and utter waste of time and money. Because that went on for basically the whole of January. This negotiation with Barcelona to bring in Denis Suarez, and we spent ages and ages and ages working out a deal where we wouldn't have to buy him in the end. And for what? And I think, there were a few players in the mix in those last couple of days of the transfer window. And I really think that, I don't think Perisic was the right guy. And I'm not even sure Carrasco was the right guy. But I really think we got the wrong type. I mean, when I look at that list of what we require, as poor as we are defensively, I do think a wide player with pace and goal threat is so, so high on the list. I think we're desperately short in that respect.
Yeah. I think I've got more questions on this in relation to the owners and stuff like that. So anything else? I mean, this is a long part 1, but anything else you want to bring up before we move on to the questions and deal with those issues?
Not really. I mean, I'm sure there'll be stuff in the questions that will cover that ground. I think we've had a lot of questions today, perhaps understandably so.
Yeah.
No, I think let's just let's get into it.
All right, we'll take a break. You guys go grab yourself a cup of tea, because I reckon part 2 could be a long one as well. We'll talk to you in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show, where we answer questions that you sent to us on Twitter at Gunnerblog and at Arseblog, on the Arseblog Facebook page, facebook.com/the Arseblog, and also on the Arseblog members Patreon Discord server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. Just to give you a little heads up about something we did there last week, a really quite fun podcast where we picked our most hated Premier League 11s of all time. Myself and James and Andrew Allen did that. It was good fun.
It was. I've changed my answer now. It was the 11 who started at Leicester for Arsenal.
Well, you can have a listen to that if you're an Arseblog member on Patreon. If you're not, you can sign up for a $5 a month, and you get access to a whole pile of podcasts. That one, loads of interviews, loads of history podcasts, articles, all kinds of stuff, and it helps support everything else that we do on the site here as well. Patreon.com/Arseblog. That's Patreon.com/Arseblog. And from there, I'm going to take the first question, James. It comes from Sam Lawson 89. It's a variation on a theme. We've had many questions along these lines. He says, badly morning to you, Sam. Where do we go from here? We have an owner that seemingly has no interest in his franchise being competitive. An old school director of football whose strategy seems to be rooting around for scraps from Barcelona's bins. And a manager whose setup looks to have cost us a top 4 finish when the prospects look great for us on paper with 6 games to go. Would replacing Emery make any difference? Do we need somebody who understands what it means to be Arsenal on the board, or is all this futile while under the ownership of KSE? Are we in the Hicks and Gillette era Liverpool?
Yes, we are. We are. And while that question was being asked, I was thinking of Liverpool. I've been thinking of Liverpool quite a lot recently, and I was specifically thinking of Hicks and Gillette, and the problems in that period for Liverpool were so endemic, and they're a little bit reflective of where we are now as a club, because they're a club with lofty aspirations who had really sunk to, they were kind of outside the Champions League quite relatively frequently, weren't they? They were sort of around that 5th, 6th mark, sort of where we are, on the fringes of the elite, but not really part of it. And I think that, while there were frustrations with players and managers in that time, certainly, I do think the ownership were the root cause there. And I think it is sort of fair to suggest that it's probably the same at Arsenal. And ultimately, if you look at Liverpool now and what an incredible transformation it's been, I think there have been some major factors in that. I think the shift in ownership was huge and galvanised everything around that club, and galvanised them ultimately to get a manager who I think has done a really incredible job. And I know it's sort of not the done thing, seemingly, to sort of dish out too much praise to Liverpool, but it looks like they're not going to win this league title. But to run that Man City side quite as close as they have, given the resources that City have at their disposal, and people say Liverpool spent money, but it's money that they mostly made through player sales, I think is pretty amazing, sort of whether they win it or not.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be on 91 points and be in doubt of the title is incredible.
Kind of ludicrous, yeah.
Yeah, and there was another question here, sort of along the same lines from Lasse Hammer, at Lasse Hammer. He says, the feeling of disconnect with the club and this bunch of players is as big as I've ever felt. What needs to be done for this to change, right? And to me, it's not so much the players. I mean, I get the frustration with the players, and we've talked about the ones we don't particularly care for one way or the other, and I think that's reasonable. But for me, it's the fact that I don't feel like Arsenal as a football club is one that is being run in a way that we can all connect with. Because what we hear very occasionally from the owner or his son is just not realistic at all. Do you remember when the Super Bowl was on and they were talking about it being the Champions League final of whatever it was, and they brought Raul Sanllehi over and whoever, and Arsenal's executives were at the Super Bowl because the LA Rams were playing in it, and that was Kroenke's team, and Josh was talking about, how he'd love to see Arsenal in the Champions League final. I can't remember the exact details of what he was saying, and I'm thinking, hang on, how can you even say that out loud when we are so far away from achieving anything like that, from even being potentially capable of getting to the Champions League final? You're talking about it as if it's some sort of nebulous aspiration that's unachievable. Well, it's certainly unachievable the way they're running the club. I mean, you've got to have some kind of ambition. If we felt like we were owned by people who really, really wanted to make Arsenal a sporting success, I don't know that we would feel the same kind of angst. But what we can't see is a plan or behaviours or a strategy that is designed to get us to where we would want us to be, or where Josh or Stan say they want us to be, competing for the biggest trophies and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't. That's where it is for me anyway. Is that I don't believe them. I don't believe what they say because it's bullshit. It doesn't make any sense. It's like me saying I want to be a fucking astronaut. I can say it all I want, but it's not going to happen. Maybe when I was 18, if I'd wanted to be an astronaut, I could, could do something about it. But not now. I can't be an astronaut now.
I agree. I don't think you'll be an astronaut, Andrew.
No, I don't.
It pains me to say it, but I don't think it's good. I don't think we'll be replaying this clip 10 years down the line and saying, can you believe it? You didn't think you'd make it, but there you are, podcasting from space.
No,
I know what you mean. And there is a lack of realism, certainly in everything the Cronkies put out publicly, that I think is kind of dispiriting. It sort of makes you feel like, well, this is all a charade. It doesn't really matter. I think that is true. And I think that speaks to really their sort of lack of knowledge of the Premier League, really, and English soccer and what that is and how difficult that task is. I think it's partly that is their ignorance that leads to them speaking about it in that way.
Let me play devil's advocate a little bit here. Just a little bit.
Okay.
Not much, though. Just a little bit. Do you give them this summer? Because
they own the club now? And
it'll be their first summer in 100% control. They've very clearly made an executive decision not to do anything in January. And we all, I guess, hope that the reason for that is because they've got bigger plans for the summer, right? So do we give them to this summer and see what they do, or how do we? Well,
we can do. I mean, we don't owe them anything, I would say.
I'm not saying we owe them, but we
have to give them time. But I think, there is an argument, isn't there, to say, let's see what they do. I think it's more, what happens if they don't. I think that's really the problem is that ultimately, it kind of feels like nothing will happen either way. It's a locked up deal, and it's not going to change anytime soon. We had the intransigence of Wenger for many years, and now we've got the intransigence of the Cronkies, and I think that's probably even more dangerous, much more dangerous.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that Arsenal can achieve what the Cronkies say they want the club to achieve with this self-sustaining model that they are so wedded to?
I don't know. Sorry, that's my phone going.
It's okay.
I don't know. Can they achieve what they want to achieve with a self-sustaining model? To me, it's not impossible, but it would take something pretty amazing.
Yeah, you've got to be super smart, super good at buying, super good at selling. You've got to have a really good setup behind the manager or the coach or whatever it is to really drive the club forward, right? And we don't have a head of recruitment. We've got a massive gap in our setup as it is.
Yeah, I mean, you can do what Liverpool have done, and you still aren't guaranteed to win the league. Do you know what I mean? It's that hard. So I think it's possible, but you need to get an awful lot right. I don't think we're close to doing that at this point. We're sort of a league below that, essentially. And the question was like, what will change? How much would it change it if Unai Emery went? And I think the reason partly that I'm more tolerant of Unai Emery than some is simply because I look at what we are, which is a club trying to get into the Champions League on Europa League money, and I think he might be one of the better people to do that very specific job. So I don't think he's going to win the Premier League. I don't think he's going to win the Champions League. I don't think he's probably even going to compete for those things. But I think he might, in the circumstances, with the ownership that we have, with the budgets that we have, potentially be someone who could bridge that gap and bring us a rung up that ladder.
Okay, so if he does that, let's say he wins the Europa League and gets us into the Champions League,
Sack him.
Would you be...
I said that as a joke yesterday, but...
Well, I know you're joking, and it sounds absurd almost to say sack a man who has won us a European trophy, but if you don't believe he's somebody who can win us the league, and you don't believe he's somebody who can win the Champions League, if you get into the Champions League, what do you do? I mean, do you hang on to him?
Maybe.
And just sort of let him consolidate?
Yeah, I would see it more like that. I think in an ideal world, let's say we scrape into the Champions League this year, which we could still do via the Europa League or even via the Premier League if we're very, very lucky.
Yeah.
I guess it would be a bit like... It's a little bit like when a manager gets promoted from the Championship and the club are sort of obliged to stick with them.
Yeah.
And either they sort of consolidate and it's all right, or they end up getting sacked halfway through the season and they're called a victim of their success. But really what it is that they're very good at getting teams promoted. And that's what they're really good at. It's like Neil Warnock. He's great at getting teams up. Turns out he's brilliant at taking them down too, because that's what he does. And I see Unai Emery and I see a guy who wins Europa Leagues and has got some top 4 finishes at time, and I see a guy who can get a team into the Champions League. And I think that is sort of the limit of it. But we don't behave like a club with the ambition or the spending power to sort of jump from where we are now to where we want to be in one summer, in one step. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But, given that Unai Emery appears to have fucked up the top 4 and our path into the Champions League might come via the Europa League, that's the thing that he's good at, right? Is that the thing that Unai Emery is good at? The Europa League? I mean, it could well be. I'm not necessarily being critical of that, but that might well be the thing that Unai Emery is good at.
Well, he's definitely good at it.
Okay,
I mean,
so he's
definitely good at that.
So, apart from the time he spent at PSG, where winning the league in his second season, you can't take that away from a manager, but, it is a bit like being a giant and going in and kicking the shit out of a room full of toddlers, in a way, from a sporting and financial point of view. What PSG had to spend in the French league, was way above what everybody else did, and winning the league is. Not winning the league actually is the surprising thing, which he didn't do in his first season, because I think it was Monaco. Was it Monaco who won it in his first season in France? And then, he didn't really perform in the Champions League with PSG. With his previous clubs, he's been a 6th, 7th place manager.
Well, I don't think that's true. Valencia, I think it was third.
Oh, was it? Okay. All right.
And I'm just trying to check. I mean, I didn't know this, by the way. I'm not trying to catch you out. I'm just checking it as we were speaking, because I was thinking, I said he's someone who was capable of getting top 4 finishes in the league, but maybe that's not true. He was at Sevilla 2013 to 2016. So that was 5th, 7th, to be fair to you. So he was finishing higher at Valencia than he was at Sevilla. Yeah.
So 6th place, 3rd place.
He's not. Look, I don't think he's someone who can take this squad and make it compete with Klopp and Guardiola. I would never contend that.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's not. I mean, I don't know that anybody really believes that to be the case.
No.
No.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, if I thought that Kroenke would bring a manager in this summer who thought could affect that scale of change very rapidly, so let's say within 2 seasons could have us competing for football's biggest prizes and could give them the support that would require, of course, I would say let's do that.
Yeah. Okay, but if you don't see this guy as being the guy to make that kind of a plan, how long do you stick with it in the hope that you can just stabilize things and then build on it. Like, let's be fair. Let's be fair. Let's be fair about. Oh, so you give Emery another year? I mean, look, Liverpool went through how many managers before they got Klopp? I know they had the whole Hicks and Gillette era as well, but they did go through a number of managers before they got Klopp, and the difference in Liverpool now compared to when Klopp took over is marked, but it's also 3.5 years. But I think he's had support. He's had the right kind of support from the board at Liverpool. You think about even the Suarez thing with us and the way that money has been spent there. It's felt like Liverpool have had a strategy to get them to where they are now, between the manager and the owners. And I don't know that we have that. Maybe we do. And maybe the famous tight-lipped Arsenal will surprise us all this summer with an amazing display of transfer business acumen and ruthlessness and everything else. And, I get it too. Emery's had a tough gig. He hasn't been backed in the transfer market in January. I just wonder if he's sort of somebody who could have been the right man but is at the club at the wrong time. I worry about his personality. I think there's just something about his personality that isn't quite right for the club at this moment in time. I think...
Maybe. I feel like I don't know him at all. Do you know what I mean? Because of the language thing, I'm just like, he could be... It's a bit of a blank canvas for me.
I'd love to hear another interview with him in, where he talks to somebody in Spanish. There was one a few weeks ago, maybe in Marca or AS or one of those, where he came across much more... He's much more interesting in his own language than he is in English.
Yeah, sure.
In English, it's like, it's just this sort of weird word salad that makes it hard to connect with him, on a personal level. And I know we judge him for what he does, but, that's part of it as well.
Yeah, massively.
If you can feel like you're connecting with a man as well as a manager, I think that would give you a bit more leeway. And I don't know that Emery can do that in English. And I'm not being critical of that, because it's ridiculously hard to go to a new country, learn a new language and be as expressive. Even still, I'm not sure you would suggest that Unai Emery is one of the great communicators.
No, I suspect even in his own language, he's never going to be...
Yeah,
he's never going to be, like certain other managers in that respect.
Listen, go on.
Listen, this question comes from Aidan Kabuddy, and Aidan says, my question goes to Arseblog. I've been listening to you for the whole season, and I know you have doubts about the manager. So my question is, would you sack Emery and hire a new coach? Give an honest answer. And then he says, who would you hire in his position? I think that's sort of a bit of a difficult question, but would you sack Emery?
Would I say no? I mean, look, he could still get us to where we need to go this season. We could still finish in the top four. I don't think it's likely, but it's possible. And we could win the Europa League, and that would be an amazing thing for this club. And I think in the short term angst and frustration that we're all feeling, we're maybe losing sight of what an achievement that would be and how much fun it would be. And would I sack him? I said this before, I don't think he is the right man for the club if we have ambitions of winning the Premier League. The issue I have isn't so much with Emery, and I think he's a decent guy. I think he's an honest guy, as much as football managers, can be honest. The issue is, under the current ownership, unless you give the manager the right backing financially, and you have the right setup behind, this new head coach, it's going to be a struggle, and that's where I have the most doubt. Is I think that under Kroenke, unless we find somebody with an absolute force of personality and somebody who can get more out of players than Emery's getting right now, I just wonder if you just keep going around and round on that merry-go-round. Like, if you were to say to me today, right now, we can sack Emery and bring in somebody who will be better, of course. Of course. Mm-hmm. That's the reality of football management now. You know, as soon as we sacked Arsene Wenger, we're in the world that every other club is in, where managers don't stay for 10 years or 20 years. They might stay for 2 seasons or 18 months or 3 years, and then they go. And that's where we are. This season, if having been in a position where we could have secured top 4 with relatively, I use that word, of course, but relatively kind fixtures, and we don't achieve top 4 because we've won 1 game out of 5, and we've got 2 to go. Who knows how many of those 2 will win? And if we don't win the Europa League, then I think there are big questions to ask of Unai Emery. So I wouldn't be against it if we could bring in somebody who would do better. Of course not. But I think he's. I'm very torn on this, James. You know, I'm quite. It's a lot to consider, isn't it? Because you know your rational mind tells you he deserves a transfer window, and he deserves, you know, maybe a chance to rebuild the squad based on his first season in charge. Mm-hmm. You know, all of that. You would say it's a reasonable thing to say a manager in his first season at a club can only affect a certain amount of change. And if he can then present a plan to the board or whoever and say, look, this is what we need to do. These are the players we need to get. These are the ones we need to get rid of. And if there's a willingness to give him that backing and to do that work that he sees, then, you know, absolutely. But I also think that if a manager gets to a point in the season where he loses 5 or 6 of the last 7 league games and maybe doesn't get to the Europa League final, loses against Valencia, then I don't think it's unreasonable to have doubts about his suitability either, you know? So it's a hard one, it really is.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because they're very different managers and very different personalities hired for very different reasons, but I suppose there is a comparison to be drawn with Ole Solskjaer at United in that he sort of started relatively well, but I think, you know, had lost sort of 6 of 7 or something going into the Chelsea game, has certainly been on a really terrible run. But one suspects that United, my hunch says they will back him in the summer. Having made that choice, you know, they will spend money to give him what he wants. I don't feel like our ownership are going to do the same. I suppose my sort of broader feeling on Emery is that when Arsene went, there was a sort of sense of, well, then the next guy might be a kind of ferryman, a transition guy, you know, might not be the guy for the long term. It'll be a difficult job to be that sort of successor. And basically nothing about Emery has really changed that for me. And in some ways, I sort of think he's kind of the right character to be in that role. And I, you know, we had a question from AFC_Islington 74 saying, how would you, knowing what we know now, do you think in hindsight a punt of Arteta would have seen things go differently? Maybe it would, but I never really wanted an Arteta or a Vieira or a Ljungberg or whoever it might be to be in that position, because I looked at it with the ownership, with the squad, with where we were in the table, with the budget, and thought, this is a bit of a shit job.
Yeah.
Like, it's a really tough job. And I think, you know, I'm not wedded to Emery, and I mean it when I say if he got us up into the top 4 and he had a year of stabilising it and someone better was available, I would replace him without sentiment, without any issues. I mean, in some ways, that's what I like most about Emery, is that I don't feel sentimental about him. You know, I don't know him. So if the time comes and there is someone better we can get,
well, yeah, do it.
Know,
do it.
Do it.
Yeah.
And I think every Arsenal fan would probably agree. You know, it's not like the manager has that sort of groundswell of support or love or affection that our previous manager did. It's not been built up. And I think, you know, his kind of his linguistic problems, I think, could contribute to that, because I think it stops us knowing him.
Yeah, maybe so. But I also kind of feel a little bit like the football is antithetical to what we would like Arsenal to be and how we want Arsenal to be, right? You know, we can all embrace the pragmatism of tactical flexibility and changes and setting up, you know, for the opposition. And we all wanted that when we were getting done, you know, in the last years of Arsene Wenger, where he tried to do it but couldn't do it because it's just not what he is and not what he does. You know, that's not the way he operated. But at the same time, I think our fondest memories and what we aspire for Arsenal to be is a team that plays good football and attacking football. And that's why I asked you the question about the style earlier. You know, we've had good spells this season, but we haven't had sustained periods where we've played really, really well and achieved results because we've played well. You know, and I think that's hard to take on board.
Yeah, even the games that we've won, you know, they have felt like marginal gains that have swung those matches. And I think, to be honest, a lot of the time the coach deserves credit for that, but it's not particularly easy on the eye. I mean, I've thought a lot this season about that famous Dennis Bergkamp quote, which was, do you love Arsenal, or do you only love Arsenal with trophies? And I've felt like this season the question's been, do you love Arsenal, or do you only love Arsenal with good football? And I do think there's a sort of an interesting period of transition and reflection among Arsenal fans who had a manager who was so wedded to those principles and those ideals, but that we found frustrating. And then this season, you know, we haven't played attractive football. I'm not going to sit here at all and make the case that we have done that. We haven't. But it's been interesting how much that's been missed, because I feel like if in April, May, you know, March last year, when we were struggling under Arsene Wenger, I don't think people felt they would miss that as much as they have.
I agree, but I think also the pragmatism and the, you know, results being more important than performances, I think masks some of the issues. You know, people who say, you know, remember during the 22 game unbeaten run, and we were talking about how many chances we gave up, and eventually that was going to come back and bite us in the arse, which it has done. And look, you know, if you, I think everybody prefers good football, but we could deal with playing functional football a lot better if it was coupled with a league position that was perhaps more favourable towards that. So think about, you know, if we had drawn 3 games this week by playing defensively or playing negatively or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, if we ground out 3 draws because Emery was able to get a team together that could just do that, we might not like it, but we will be sitting in 4th place right now on 69 points. And with a home game against Brighton, potentially we could secure a top 4 this weekend. You know? So the two things have got to marry each other in a way, don't they?
They do. And in my opinion, the result almost always is what sort of colours the discourse. And inevitably, like, even if we're not convinced by the performance, it'll always be sort of tied up within that sort of caveat of, you know, but we won, and that's the important thing.
Yeah.
And we haven't won this week, and that's why it feels quite shit as it does, rather obviously. But yeah, I think we've not played good football this year. For any protracted period, certainly. And I think maybe we are sort of, as a fan base, you know, I don't want to speak for everybody, but maybe it feels like, to me, in general, people are kind of discovering that is a value that they hold more highly than they perhaps imagined that they did. That's how it seems to me.
Yeah, it's a really complicated situation. I have a lot of conflicting emotions about it, you know.
Yeah.
I really do, you know, and it's not out of any badness or anything to Emery. I just this last week has really created some doubts in my mind about his ability to do what we want him to do, even if it is that job of transitioning us into a position where we can bring in somebody to take us to the next step. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and also the chemistry is important. You know, sometimes a brilliant manager, an exceptional manager might go, you know, Brian Clough at Leeds or whatever it is, you know, sometimes it's just not quite right between the coach and the club. And what I hear from you is that you have an inkling that chemistry, that balance of personalities just isn't quite right.
Yeah, and I think
that's valid if that's so.
And I think it's to do with the context and the circumstances in which Arsenal find themselves as well. Like, because of what's happening at board level, because of the way that we're owned, because of the gaps in our setup and our structure, I think that makes it even more difficult for Emery. And I think in some ways he is not a victim of that, but maybe it just doesn't suit him to be at this club at this moment in time. That's Can I
ask a question?
Yeah.
How do you think you would feel better about the situation if we still had the sort of Gazidis, Mislintat, Sanyehi power structure that was seemingly established to be the sort of primary successor to Arsene Wenger in some ways, with Emery as a sort of satellite to it?
Yeah. Now, I
think I would.
Yeah, I would.
I'd feel a lot better about it.
I think you don't need me to tell you that I was never the biggest fan of Ivan Gazidis.
Yeah.
But I think when you're making a transition from a legacy manager like Wenger and you're moving to a more modern footballing setup, you have to have those structures in place, and we don't have them. Like, Gazidis left and Mislintat is gone. So 2/3 of that executive structure has now disappeared within what was it? Within 6 months, basically. You know, Gazidis was gone, what, 3-4 months after Wenger? I mean, that was a story that ran all summer. So, you know, that had been rumbling on. So they knew behind the scenes that Gazidis was going to fuck off. They knew that. So within literally, you know, a couple of months of Wenger going and appointing a new manager and showing him our tunnel area, he's fucking off. And then our head of recruitment, who's, you know, highly thought of and highly regarded across European football, and who brought us some good players last summer, you know, the kind of signings that we thought we were going to, or that we still think we're going to need, because we're going to have to be clever in our transfer business to find, you know, the diamonds in the rough, you know, the players that nobody else has really found and everything else. You know, for that to be gone, for there to be a power struggle and to have a sort of job share CEO, which is what we have at the moment. We don't have anybody making the final executive decision. Like, Sanyehi is the football guy and Vinay is the business guy, and together, yeah, we'll talk about these things. I don't think that's a healthy way for a football club to be run. I think you need one person who's the point of responsibility. And at the moment, we can say it's Stan or whatever. And I think we can go into this summer and say that if things don't go well from a football point of view, that is on Raul Sanyehi. But I think I would feel better if, whether it was Gazidis or anybody else, you know, if that structure was in place, because it felt like at least that was something we were going to build around. And within a few months, it was all torn down. That can't be good.
No, it can't be. And I also think that structure sort of meant that the head coach had a strong measure of accountability. I think it meant that there was sort of something bigger and potentially more sustaining than him. And I sort of have this... what does concern me is that I sort of slightly have a fear that maybe Sanyehi and Emery are a bit of a pair, like they're sort of in each other's pockets. And I worry that... I just worry that, you know, if it does come the time to move Emery on and get someone who we think might be better, I worry that we might end up in a position again. I've been burned by what happened with our previous manager, where we sort of, we're tied to him longer than we needed to be. And I worry about that. I worry about that slightly.
Yeah.
And I worry about it from a recruitment point of view massively, because I really was a fan of sort of having a guy who brought the players in, and
look, I think they did a good job of trying to play down the impact that Mislintat had. Yeah. I think there was a bit of back channel, I won't say smearing, but downplaying the contribution he made and the contribution he could have made, Well,
I think you have to look at our signings from last summer and say, for the most part, they've worked out pretty well. I mean, everyone seems very happy with Bernd Leno. Lucas Torreira, I think there's a lot of promise there. Socrates, Guendouzi, I think has obviously increased in value, regardless of what you think of his ability right now. So only really Lichtsteiner has been a disaster. And then you look at what happened in January, where you assume that Sven was sort of less part of proceedings, and we end up with Denis Suarez. It's not
exactly
a difficult equation.
How many of those summer signings do you think had any connection to Raul Sanllehi and his big book of contacts?
I mean, I would say probably none.
None. Maybe Lichtsteiner. Maybe, who knows? I don't know. I mean, that really seemed like a non-Sven signing to me. I don't quite know who made that decision. I mean, who made that decision?
I don't know.
Don't know either. It didn't, based on...
It didn't feel as disastrous at the time as it does now. Let's be fair. But yes, it's not a classic Sven deal. But then I guess neither was sort of Henrik Mkhitaryan in some ways, or Aubameyang given their age profile. But look, again, like Aubameyang panned out.
He's scored 25 goals this season, so I'm not. Mkhitaryan's a different thing. Sanchez for Mkhitaryan has got to be the worst swap deal anyone's ever made, ever.
Unbelievable
for both clubs. I think it's. Just...
I like how people keep going. Yeah, well, we got the better end of it, and it's like we did, but that is the shittest victory. Do you know what I mean? Like, given that Sanchez has been the worst signing, sort of in terms of salary, probably ever in the Premier League. Us going like, Mkhitaryan scored 6 goals. It's like, but we didn't win, guys. We really didn't win there.
We didn't win. No, I mean it's like suggesting only having your foot chopped off when the other guy's had his both legs chopped off somehow makes you the man on top. Well, yeah, I guess it does, but it doesn't alter the fact you don't have a fucking foot.
No, I mean the strongest thing I can say about it is that even though Sanchez looks sort of potentially like finished at the top level, if you could go back in time and we could keep Sanchez and not have Mkhitaryan, I would still probably do that.
I would too.
Which seems like crazy given that he's not scored for 2 years or whatever it is.
But do you think if he'd stayed at Arsenal that he wouldn't have? I know his contract was up and everything else, but
I think he would have dipped inevitably with time and with age, and I think he would have continued to frustrate as he did a little bit in his final season. But I still think, I think he'd get in our team now. Let's put it like that.
Fucking right he would. Let's move on. I've got a question here from Grampian Gunner, and I've got another one as a sort of follow-up to this one. He says, with rumours circulating that Cech will be joining Chelsea in the summer as a goalkeeping coach, does it worry you as much as me that he could potentially be playing for his future employers for a Champions League spot? And also... Telly-Tub, who's Elias, who's at Telly-Tub, I think, says, with Leno being in top form and keeping our goal average from being too embarrassing, bar the Wolves debacle, of course, would you stick with Cech in goal in the Europa League, or would you let our best goalkeeper play?
So I don't think that it's a concern that Cech might be joining Chelsea in a backroom role. That doesn't worry me at all. I think he's a very good professional, and I don't doubt his focus will be on the game. However, I think with the stakes being as high as they are, and with top 4 looking like it's gone, and the Europa League being of vital importance, I would start Leno from this point on. Me too. I've changed my mind on this. I thought, Cech would be fine, but
given how well Leno has played and how much more important the Europa League is now.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, Cech can play in the Premier League if he likes. Do you know what I mean? The Europa League feels like sort of it for our season.
Yeah.
So
play your best team.
Yeah, and it's taken the top 4 being gone for me to really feel that quite so strongly.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we'd achieved Champions League football via the Premier League, I would be much more inclined to stick with Cech and to allow him the opportunity to go out and to finish his career with a trophy and everything else, because it takes some of the pressure off. We all want to win the trophy, and I don't necessarily say we should lose the final, but I think we'd be easier with the decision to pick Cech if we were already in the top 4, or if top 4 looked really, really likely and we could secure it this weekend with a, win against Brighton or whatever it is. But, we fucked it up. We've only won 1 game in our last 5 in the Premier League, and that changes things. That changes, how I think about the manager, and it changes how I think we should set up our team. So yeah, like you, I don't worry about him. If he does pick Cech, I don't think it's a case that he's going to go, well, I'll just let one through my legs here because next season I'm going to be playing for Chelsea. I don't think that's the case, but yeah, there you go.
Questions. I mean, to be fair, a lot of the ground that I had sort of lined up for questions, we've sort of ramblingly covered. I mean, this from Darren O'Brien, had a couple of variants on this from a few other people, was would you take a couple of seasons of lower league positions to completely overhaul the squad and maybe build a youthful athletics side?
I mean, look, it sounds like a nice idea, doesn't it? But again, it's got to be based on a strategy and a coherent strategy that we can believe. And you know what I mean? So if the club came out, if we thought we had like top class recruitment people, top class administrators and everything else, and they said, look, here's what we're going to do. We are going to rebuild. We're going to, promote a lot of promising youth. We're going to bring in some young players. It might be a step backwards to take a step forwards. I think on paper, in our minds, we can all get behind that. The reality of playing week in, week out, though, makes that much more difficult, right? Because we can say, yes, I'm patient. Yes, I can deal with this rebuilding. Yes, I could, take a few bad results if I can see that it is part of this strategy. But I don't believe that such a strategy exists or would exist at Arsenal. So I think it's more and more, or certainly this season has been more and more important to get back into the Champions League, because I don't feel like we can just go all the way backwards and press reset. Do you?
No, and I think every year that we're out of the Champions League is costly and probably takes us further away.
Tens of millions of pounds, according to Vinay, who is our joint chief executive dude.
I think there is a bit of time pressure here, and I think that's right. So it is a really appealing idea in some respects to completely blow it up and put the kids in and see how we go. I'm not sure how realistic it is, unfortunately.
No. Here's a question from @Anish Chandoke. And he says, next Premier League game is the last home game for Aaron Ramsey. Will he get some sort of farewell, or will the tense atmosphere force the club to do nothing? The last player to leave for free after long service was Rosicky, and he got a guard of honour, but we had nothing to play for. So how do you feel like the club might mark the final game of Aaron Ramsey at the Emirates?
He's unlikely to be fit, is
he? I mean, I don't know. I don't know
either. We were told 2 to 3 weeks, which seemed ambitious at the time. I mean, wow, we've missed him. I mean, to a certain extent, we kind of were, it kind of made the system work, didn't it? Having Ramsey in the central midfield, and without him, we've completely gone to pieces.
Yeah.
I don't think there will be anything special marketing. I think Rosicky was a bit of a different case in that he was sort of towards the end of his top level career. But Ramsey is essentially sort of leaving to go to a bigger and better club in some ways. And I think, I don't think that's something that we'll be happy to make lots of noise about, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Do you think they'll do anything? Maybe captain if he plays, but...
Yeah, maybe they could do that. I don't know about a guard of honour. I think we've got to focus first and foremost on the game against Brighton, which we we have to win, of course, to get ourselves back to winning ways, which we could do on Thursday, of course, against Valencia. We could get back to winning ways there. I'm not 100% sure that we will, but there you go. Does he deserve? I mean, they'll probably have the lap of appreciation, will they? Depending on what happens against Brighton, and maybe what happens against Valencia on Thursday. I think, to be honest, Ramsey deserves some kind of recognition for a good career with us. He's spent 10 years? Is it 10 years now? I know he's leaving on a free, but he's done a very good job for us down the years. He suffered a terrible injury. He's always given his best. He scored 2 cup final winners. I'm really hoping he can score another cup final winner before he leaves. That's obviously incumbent on us getting to the Europa League final. That would be a great way to say goodbye, but will they do? I don't know that there'll be anything.
I think, they will do the lap of honour, as you say, and he'll probably get a very special send-off from the fans during that. But I don't know if they'll mark it in any sort of more official way than that.
Yeah. Have you got another one, or?
I did have one. It was on the Discord. Let's see if I can find it. It was from Start Many. He just said, what do you think about Emery saying technical quality without physicality is not enough in the Premier League when he approved the signing of Suarez, who is the definition of lightweight?
I didn't see that quote.
Oh, it was in an interview he gave to Sky Sports, I think. And he was really talking about the importance of physicality and that being one of the big sort of lessons of his time in the Premier League. It will be interesting to see how much that influences what he does what Arsenal do in the summer.
Welcome Nzonzi.
Yeah, welcome Nzonzi. I can see the hashtag now.
What do I think? I mean, I think maybe you have to take the two things in isolation a little bit. Suarez wasn't brought in a position where physicality is necessarily the key factor, is it? He was going to play wide left or wide right if he had been fit and or good enough. I mean, the more I think about it, the more ridiculous a deal it was. He had barely played all season for Barcelona. He wasn't match fit. It's bad transfer.
I mean, I guess if we'd had a spate of injuries in that position, we'd say, oh, good job we got Denis Suarez. But, it hasn't panned out that way. On the physicality thing, I think sometimes we hear that and we assume we're going to sign, or we need 6'5" muscle-bound guys. I think what a big thing we lack in this team at the moment is sprinters. I really think, I spoke about it earlier, but in the wide areas particularly, we're kind of one-paced, and I think that is a big, big problem. If you look at Liverpool, look at City, the speed they have in those wide areas is, incredible. And even Chelsea and United, and Spurs, players like Son, Hudson-Odoi, I know he's injured now, but Rashford, we don't have that.
Yeah.
So that would be something definitely that we really need to add.
Yeah, I've got a question here, which is something I think that you talked about on Twitter during the week, and I tend to agree with you about this one, but it comes from Brownlow03, who says, why don't we ever buy players from within the Premier League? We can see clearly that there are quality players in the teams below us who have good Premier League experience, and he cites people like Fraser, Richarlison, Maddison, and then he says, who was the last Premier League player that we bought? Was it Chambers? I can't remember, but he says Liverpool, City and Spurs do well buying within the Premier League, and they don't necessarily have to spend big money. Is that something you think we maybe need to focus on a little bit more when it comes to our recruitment?
Definitely, I really do. And again, I feel like I use Liverpool's reference a lot, but they've done it exceptionally well. And it's not just Van Dijk, it's people like Robertson, even squad players like Shaqiri, who's been okay for them this season. Henderson, it goes on. And I think Arsenal fans are sometimes a little bit snobbish about other Premier League players. I mean, if I look at the reception, someone like, I don't know, Fraser at Bournemouth, something like that, you know, people are a bit unconvinced, and I can understand that. But, every week we go out, we play against these players, and they do a lot of damage against us, and yet we say, oh, no, they're not Arsenal quality. I think that's a bit of a hangover from the days when Arsene Wenger was sort of plucking unknowns from the French second division, and, they were making a massive difference in the Premier League. But, I'm sure there are players outside the top six who could improve us, and we see it. We see it.
They'd walk into our team, James.
Players walk into our team.
Well, no, in fairness, you can not necessarily Crystal Palace, but certainly the games against Wolves and Leicester, you could see players that would do a good job for us. No question.
Yeah, I mean, and in the Palace game, I mean,
Zaha?
Wilfried Zaha has a lot of the attributes that we really lack. And Wolves have got some terrific players, I think. Really, really good players. I mean, I think you'd actually struggle to get them out of there because...
Yeah, you would. But I mean, in fairness, they have spent a lot of money. And there is this weird Portuguese transfer cartel shit going on there, which is a little bit difficult. But, it's a strategy. It's an effective strategy. Maybe one people can turn their noses up at, but it is a functioning, effective strategy. Wolves have been promoted and could finish as high as 7th based on the plan that they put in place. So, it says a lot for having that, and probably says a lot about where we are.
And also, I think it says a lot about the way the Premier League is structured. I think it's probably easier to go from 20th to 7th than it is for us to go from 6th to 2nd. I think the gap at the top is widening. When you look at Liverpool and City, how good they are compared to everybody else, we are miles off them. Yeah, absolutely miles off.
Isn't it mental? I saw a clip of Arsene Wenger talking at the weekend, and he said Tottenham are in 3rd and they've lost 12 games.
I know, because they haven't drawn any, have they? They've drawn like 1 or 2, I think. So.
I know, but imagine losing 12 games and being 3rd.
Yeah.
That's mental. And I don't know if that says a lot about, Liverpool and Manchester City and how far ahead they are. It probably does. But I think it also tells you something about the teams below 3rd. Arsenal, Manchester United, Chelsea, and how poor collectively the seasons have been for all three.
Yeah, I think United and Chelsea have had, we've spent good periods of this season laughing at them. And unfortunately, we're now in the period of the season where they're probably laughing at us. I think it is a little bit sort of who's the least bad out of those three. And it's incredible that Sarri, who has spent the entire season being abused by his own fans, and we've sort of thoroughly enjoyed it on this podcast, could end the season as being the guy who not only makes the top 4, but has still got a possibility to win a trophy too, the Europa League, and reached a final. In the League Cup final. So it's kind of crazy, isn't it, to think that he was the one who everyone was kind of taking the piss out of and might come up trumps in the end.
Yeah, okay.
We shall see. I mean, it is ludicrous, but the top 4 is still possible. If Leicester beat Chelsea, it's possible. I'm not saying it'll happen, but it's possible.
Yeah.
And that speaks, I think, to how... I mean, look
it's a
look
crazy
at the results.
Season.
We're talking about our results. No one's won a game. Spurs haven't won a game. United haven't won a game. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, actually, Tottenham, their last 3 games, lose, win, lose. Chelsea's last 3 games, lose, draw, draw. Arsenal, lose, lose, lose. Manchester United, lose, lose, draw. I mean, it just adds to the frustration, of course, because, we don't really care what the other teams do, but what we do, I'm not saying we don't care, but when they lose, we should be there to take advantage, and we weren't. But there you go. This has been a long podcast, James. I think we should...
The longest ever.
It is.
I would say.
It is. I texted you yesterday and I said, I think this could be the longest Arsecast Extra of all time, and lo and behold, it is. I'm not sure we've found any answers, but I wonder if talking it out has made you feel any better at all?
Yeah, it always does a bit, and I hope it has made the listeners feel a bit better. We've got a massive game on Thursday, so
yeah,
we've not even talked about it, but it's huge now, isn't it? Absolutely huge.
It is absolutely massive. Valencia on Thursday at the Emirates, first leg, where, you know, we could take a great stride towards making the Europa League final. And let's hope that, you know, if the consequence of this terrible league form, which is absolutely terrible, is to make us focus 100 and bazillion% on the Europa League, let's hope we see that reflected in the performance on Thursday, because anything like the last few games, and we're going to get frustrated again. As far as I can tell, this game takes on greater importance for Valencia because they lost at the weekend, and it leaves them in 6th place in La Liga. The gap isn't huge now. In fairness, they're on 52 points. Yeah. It's 3 points to Getafe, who are in 4th. But it means that potentially the Europa League is a bit more important for Valencia if they want to get back into the Champions League as well. So, and look, you're in a semi-final where every player is going to want to be in the final. So it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge. I wouldn't like to call it.
I am not going to call it.
No.
Let's see.
Me neither. Okay, I think what we can do is call an end to this podcast. Thank you very much indeed if you've listened all the way through. Maybe it's taken you more than one go, but thanks as ever for being with us. We will, I think I might have a little extra bonus podcast this week looking at Valencia themselves. I'm trying to work that out, but keep an eye on the feed. That will be out maybe tomorrow or Wednesday if I can make that happen. In the meantime, what final words of comfort can I give us? At least we didn't get our foot chopped off.
Hey, there's that.
There is that. We'll catch you on the next one, folks.
Yeah. Bye-bye.